Okay, counselors, are we ready? Okay. Good evening. I would like to call to order the study council session for the City of Wheat Ridge, State of Colorado, for October 16th, 2023. We have two items to review on our agenda. Number one is an overview of the utility districts within city boundaries. Item number two is sidewalk maintenance program. And we will have a special city council meeting immediately following our study session to enact one piece of business. That's a motion to cancel the October 23rd, 2023 regular business meeting due to the lack of agenda items. So we will address that right after our meeting. We will start our meeting as we usually do with comments from the public. You may come and speak on any item on the agenda. So that's item number one or number two during citizens' right to speak or public comment. And I don't have anyone signed up to speak, but if you're joining us in City Hall chambers, or if you're joining us online, we'd love to have you come and speak. If you're joining us online, please raise your hand in the virtual format and we'll be happy to bring you into the meeting. So I'm going to give that just a moment to see if we have anybody raising their hand to speak at our meeting, and I don't see anybody in council chambers coming forward, but we'll give it just another half a minute or so. I want to close it off too soon.
Nobody with their hand raised.
Okay, no one is wishing to speak, so we will go to agenda item number one. This is an overview of utility districts within the City of Wheat Ridge boundary. And Mr. Goff, I think we have a staff presentation on this item. Pretty sure that we do.
Thank you, we do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
This was an item that was suggested by City Council to bring forward just to educate us, all of us. I've learned a lot, actually, after reading Maria's memo, but as you know, we have numerous districts in our community. We're not a full-service city. Our city attorney hates when we say we're not a full-service city, but we're not. We don't provide water and sewer, and so Maria's done a great job of putting together a memo and kind of a 101 on special districts. So,
great, thank you. Yeah, I learned so much putting this together. Having worked in multiple or other cities that did have water and sewer, this has been an interesting aspect to learn about this, and just interacting with the water and sanitation districts over the last year and working with them to try and put projects together. And then, of course, ditches. So worked with one ditch in another city, but I didn't realize the plethora of that we have here and the laterals and how that all fits together. So this was really educational for me as well. I did put a presentation together, which I'll just briefly go over, but happy to stop, answer questions along the way. The intent really is for, it was informational, so there's really no action required of council, really just to update you, and I try and answer any questions that I can. I may have to stand up here to.
oh, is it not working? Do you want me to?
Yeah.
I think I might just stop.
I've got some WD-40 in the car.
Perfect. Okay. Patrick to the rescue.
Allie's not here. Somebody's got to do it.
He's our other fill-in city clerk position. So I'll go over briefly tonight our water districts, the sanitation districts, irrigation ditches, and then our storm sewer system, which is part of the city's overall program. So water districts, and this can be very confusing for people when we talk about water, it's like, oh, water in the street or water that comes from the sky, but it's really water that we drink. So when we talk about water districts, that's what the districts are tasked with, is delivering drinkable or potable water to your homes, businesses, and various properties. So there are 5 different districts within the city. I'll just move forward to that graphic that was an attachment. So you can see on the far eastern side of town there, the large green area is Wheat Ridge Water District that makes up a good more than half. Right up in the very upper corner up here, there's a little bit of Denver Water, so that's served directly by Denver Water, I think because there's one main of theirs that comes off of there as opposed to being in a district. Then we have Valley Water up here, a couple others down here, Consolidated, and then everything actually, the Clear Creek area is served by Consolidated Water, but their water does not come from Denver Water. The Denver Water boundary is actually here at I-70 on the west. So their service area is different, but Consolidated still serves this area, but they get their water from a different source. Let's jump back to that. So those are separate entities from the city government. And as you can imagine, we get a lot of phone calls. So it's like, oh, really? And then you have to start explaining it all over again. So I know for our admin staff, I'm going to share this memo with them to give them that background, and probably some others too, so that they can give more information when we get those phone calls, and try to identify, and help people, what's your address, how can we put you in touch with the correct district that you're in, and just give a little bit of a background of how that is. But as I mentioned, all of those districts purchase water from Denver Water, and even Consolidated as well, and they do that through a master meter agreement, meaning that there's one meter that comes, basically it's somewhere within the boundary or at the edge between Denver Water and that district. They meter it there and then pay a bulk rate to Denver Water, but then the mains from that point out to the various properties are maintained and managed by that particular district. Other districts within the Denver metro area, Denver Water will also do the maintenance and do the billing, but in this case, within Wheat Ridge, all of those districts do their own billing and then are responsible for the mains, valves, et cetera. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the service line that connects from the water main in the street, typically, not always the case, but the water usually runs down the center of the street. Then sanitary is off to the one side. It varies either west or east, north or south. And then on the other side, if there is storm water, it's placed on the opposite side of the street from the sanitary sewer. Again, not always the case, but that tends to be what the cross-section shows here within Wheat Ridge. For the most part, the water main runs down the center of the street. Then the service line that actually connects the main to the property is actually owned, even though it's still within the right-of-way, is owned by the property owner. So anything that happens that will, if that gets damaged for any reason, if there's root intrusion or somehow breaks, it is the responsibility of the property owner, not the district or the city to fix that. And then I just wanted to touch on lead service line replacement. This has been a big issue nationwide. Back in probably up until probably the early 50s or so, a lot of lead service lines were put in place, as well as galvanized water mains. And now what we're discovering is that a lot of that lead tends to leach out into the drinking water that comes into properties. And so Denver Water, like a lot of other major major water systems throughout the country, are going through systematically and replacing those lines rather than doing something else. So they've investigated doing treatment at the plants, which would involve a lot of upgrades to take out that lead. And they felt, at least Denver Water's case, they felt it was more cost efficient to actually go out and replace the lead lines in the street rather than upgrading the plants. So they have gone about that. They've got a 15-year program in place that's being supplemented with some additional federal funds that have become available, again, kind of across the country through the President's Infrastructure Act, was passed a few years ago. And that will involve any of the service lines within the city of Wheat Ridge that are owned, or excuse me, so the service line, even though it's not owned by Denver Water, they are going through there and replacing those at no cost to the property owner. Even though, again, it's not owned by them, but they feel from a health benefit and health reduction of risk, it's beneficial for them to systematically go through and replace those. And they will be replacing the ones in Wheat Ridge as well. They just haven't gotten basically to our area yet. And the critical thing for us, besides being able to share that information with residents, there is a website where you can go in and type in your address, and it will tell you if it's like a for sure that you have a lead service line, or it's likely based on the year and some other factors that they know of, just going through their records. So that was interesting. There are definitely some areas within Wheat Ridge that have, for sure, have lead service lines. And then quite a few, mostly in the northern part of the city, that's likely. So happy to share that with you if you want to look into that further. Again, there's the map. Sanitation districts. So a lot of people get confused because they're like, oh, is that garbage service for sanitation? Nope, it's a different kind of sanitation. So it's really about the sewage that goes down the drain and how that's treated. So again, there's 7 different districts operating within the city. We have a map of that too. These colors are a little bit easier to see. But those do not coincide with the boundaries of the water districts. So another layer of confusion that you have to explain, well, you're in this district, but you could be in this sanitation district. And one for water, one for sanitary. Again, just trying to explain that to folks. But again, you can see on the eastern portion of town there, oops, excuse me, the kind of pinky purpley area, a good portion of it is the Wheat Ridge Sanitation District. So obviously we work very closely with them on quite a few projects. And then, let's see. So again, the entities, the different districts are responsible for the mains and collecting of the wastewater treatment, but all of that goes back to one of 2 treatment plants that are managed by the Metro Water Recovery, which was formerly known as the Metro Wastewater Reclamation District, if you're familiar with that. They've got one in, one plant kind of in the north of downtown area, and then another one that's a little bit further north. And then, again, similar to the water service, the service line from the main up to the property is the owner's responsibility. Irrigation ditches. So, gave a lot of history in there about how this was developed. Very interesting, but pretty much it predates even the Colorado Constitution. So back in the 50s, when mining was active here in Colorado, they brought that system of first in time, first in right to Colorado from California, and that's the way that it stayed and actually got written into the Colorado Constitution that way. Because of that, ditch companies and the associations who manage that really have many rights that supersede us in many ways. And so when we're dealing with them, it can be not only difficult because they have such rights, but also what we found is it's really hard to contact somebody. A lot of them might have just like a ditch rider, one person who works part-time. They might cover maybe a few of those. There's laterals, as I mentioned, which don't necessarily have once it breaks off from the main ditch, they don't necessarily have a ditch rider associated with that lateral. And so anybody served off of that kind of has to figure it out on their own. So there's really no one site where there's contacts or even like a list of ditches. So we've accumulated that over time, and it's constantly changing. So we'll often call the phone number that we have or an email, and then they'll say, oh, it's actually so-and-so is doing it now. And then we update our records. But we probably have, at least between the 3 primary ditches that I list there, as well as the laterals, probably about 34 different entities that we are in contact with based on where they are within the city. And I think a lot of people don't realize this either, but that the water in the ditch is allocated by shares, meaning that only people who actually own shares can take that water. So I actually back up to the Rocky Mountain ditch as well, even though I'm not in Wheat Ridge, but I'm just off to the just on the far side of I-70, but I back up to that. And when I first bought my house, I'm like, oh, good, I can put a little pump in there and water my grass for free, take that water. And I was talking to my neighbor, and it's like, oh, he says, no, you can't do that. I'm like, why not? It's right there. It's running through my backyard. And learning more and having contacted them, or at least attempting to contact them, it's been quite interesting how I deal with the trees that are adjacent to there. That's all my responsibility. All the maintenance that they do, they don't have, where I am, they don't happen to kind of have a side road. But they definitely come through and maintain it, and basically all they do is throw all the stuff up on the banks, and then it's up to the property owner to clean that up. So it's been interesting, but it does traverse, as you see, it's difficult, a little bit difficult on this map, but traverses quite a bit of the city through here, and then goes through this other kind of down here and stuff. But yeah, pretty much, around this pond here, which is down in Lakewood, but traverses quite a bit of the city. And so we get phone calls frequently from residents just not understanding. Yeah, they're like, what is this, and why are these people here? So Rocky Mountain Ditch has a fairly good website that has a lot of FAQs on it, so we direct people to that usually to get them in contact with somebody who can answer their questions. All right, and then finally, just the storm sewer system. So again, we're dealing with water, but that's pretty much water that comes out of the sky. So either rainfall or snow melt is the two primary ones that accumulate within the street system. And probably the big difference there is that because storm sewers aren't designed to carry sewage, so like the sewage systems goes to the treatment plant, and then whatever's in the water is treated at the plant. Stormwater goes directly into our waterways. So whether it's Clear Creek by a series of storm sewer pipes or through the curb and gutter down into the inlets, Lena Gulch, maybe perhaps like a lake somewhere, ultimately it goes to a waterway without being treated. While we have put in place some water quality detention requirements at new developments, it's still pretty minimal on the grand scheme of things. So that's why it's really critical to educate people about that and make sure that they're not dumping things like oil or chemicals or anything into the waterways, because eventually it ends up in those systems and can damage or kill the fish and wildlife that are within there, as well as just degrading the adjacent natural vegetation as well. So we have probably about roughly 36 miles of storm sewer. And again, what a lot of people don't know is that not every street has stormwater in it. So a lot of, and typically the way that streets are designed is to carry that water between the curb and gutter of both sides. Ideally, if you're designing a new roadway, let's say in a new part of town up in Westminster, or out in Brighton or Thornton, you want to carry that 100-year conveyance or 100-year amount within the curb and gutter, so it's not going up onto private property. Ideally, you would want that volume to stay within that, and then limit the amount of storm sewer that you have, so use gravity flow to get it to drain to various areas, and then put in storm sewer where you need it to convey it to waterways. Reading through our 1979 master drainage plan, their take was that because of the way Wheat Ridge developed, and that it was sort of piecemeal, a lot of farms way back when, without a lot of thought given to an overall stormwater management plan, where the roads laid out in relation to the houses, there isn't that amount of capacity there. Obviously, we don't have a lot of curb and gutter, but even if you look at, imagine where the curb and gutter would be, the homes sit too low in relation to the elevation of the road to gain that capacity. Ideally, the houses would be up a little bit more, so you have a little bit more room there. And therefore, their conclusion was that we will need a more robust system in order to maintain that because we don't have the capacity within the streets. As you all know, we're planning an update to that master drainage plan this next year. And then ultimately, we'll be coming back with some recommendations around implementation of the stormwater utility fee to help fund all of that, but also talking about improved maintenance as well. So I think our maintenance that we've done internally within Public Works has been a little bit haphazard. Starting to focus on that more, so cleaning it out. We've obviously seen, and I've got a few pictures here of the damage that occurred just this summer. These photos are from 39th and Hoyt at the end of Hoyt Court. This hole right here was a garbage truck that went through with their wheel right here. Obviously, a garbage truck is very heavy, but you know, if we hadn't had this blocked off, they could have taken out much more of the road. You can see here the equipment was already set up by the time this took place. And then here we are replacing the pipe. That was a 48-inch pipe, so 4 feet tall. And you can see the amount of equipment that it takes, the degradation to the road, the impacts to the neighbors. It's just very impactful. And so our goal would be is how do we stop the need for having to do that wholesale and try and maintain our system as best we can before we get to the point of full replacement. Just a couple other photos. This one on the left, this gentleman this is the pipe at 37th and Independence that we're working on right now. So this is the new section right here. They're trying to, what you see here is a lot of water in the bottom of the ditch because they're having to do it under current conditions. So we can't stop the storm water from coming. So they basically have to work in these conditions to replace the pipe and get it in as fast as they can before it gets too muddy or undermined there within the ditch. And then, I know these are exciting, but this is the pipe. We get videos of the pipes before we actually go in and replace them. And I know it's difficult to see, but right here, and probably this section a little bit too, but there's a lot of leaves, but there's a big hole here in the bottom. So this pipe looks pretty good overall, and it's like, wow, why should we have to replace that? But what's going on is there's a big hole in the bottom here, probably some minor damage going on here too. But when that erodes, now the water is getting underneath the pipe, and it's starting to have those fines kind of drift down from around the pipe, and that's what causes the street surface to sink. And, and then you can see here in this far photo, then accumulation builds up, so the debris that comes in off the street, and all of a sudden, you know, the capacity, if this was a 4-foot pipe, is compromised because we've got so much dirt and debris down in here, and that needs to be cleaned out. So it's a pretty quick, brief overview. I'd be happy to answer any questions, though.
Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Andrea. I have a quick couple questions, Maria, about the, has Denver Water ever notified residents of the lead lines? Like, are people aware of, like, are they getting notices? Like, if I had it, is there notices?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe Patrick had that.
Yeah, I got one. It's interesting, when I had my house in Denver still after I moved, that house definitely, I got a notice and they said it was definitely lead lines, so they're gonna replace it. My house here, they said maybe. And they send out, it all depends on the age, right? And some houses, they're sending filter systems out for water and stuff if it's really bad, but yeah, they are notified. And they are, I know they're going, I think Maria told me, or I heard this somewhere else, they're going much quicker in Denver, I think, with the replacement, because they got some more money. You said that, yeah.
And then for, because I know there's a lot of infrastructure and it takes a lot of money and thought, are we also kind of paralleling implementing bioswales in combination with that?
Yes, so I think I didn't put that in my presentation, but I think it's going to be a multi-pronged effort with our stormwater. So we'll definitely have sections that we need to replace, sections that we need to enlarge, But I think the other piece is doing good maintenance, and then thirdly is, as new development comes in, is upgrading or modifying our requirements
Yeah.
for detention and looking at some alternative designs like bioswales or rain gardens to capture that drainage and basically not only filter it out, so water cleanliness, but then some detention aspects as well. And I would say ours probably haven't been looked at, our requirements for development, in quite a long time. And so it wouldn't be making them more onerous than other communities, but bringing them up to what is required of any other metro area city.
And then what do you do for, like, for instance, there's a project in my neighborhood on Yarrow, the townhomes, and there was the nearest storm was on 44th and Wadsworth, which was super tiny and would have been extremely cost prohibitive. And so they put them to detention, and then what happens is the water just basically empties, when it overflows, empty as the detention goes into the curb and then would slowly make it around. Is there any way, if we had a similar situation, that I guess you could somehow stub out, like still have the detention, but somehow like get it ready for, you know, like with a cap or something where like, okay, if we ever, you know, improve the storm, that we could bring it to there, that we could just tie it in, that they wouldn't have to do major digging.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not
Yep.
doing a very good job explaining it, but.
No, yes. So, yeah, what you're describing is technically it is detention, but it's almost retention, and that
Yeah.
it's the likelihood of it getting out into the curb is pretty low, and then it becomes stagnant and place for mosquitoes and just kind of looks gross. So yes, you know, looking where we have those types of ponds, and if we were to put in storm sewer in those areas, how we can connect them is definitely something that we can look at, because I think we're almost starting from scratch here to some extent.
And then my last question is on the storm that's galvanized pipe. It has all those ridges on there, which they kind of hold the sediment and stuff, which probably hastens the rusting. I think the city was doing something maybe a year or two ago, doing like a thermal inner lining. Was that for the storm, like a thermal coating, or was that for sewer?
Probably for storm.
For storm?
Yep.
And then is that something that you would, so the galvanized, you wouldn't do that from day one? That would be something you would do down the road, that you would do that thermal coating to protect it?
Yeah, I've heard of them doing that, like, or starting with that.
Yeah.
I think what we'll find is that we'll need to I think there's other options out there, so
Okay.
looking at plastic instead of concrete or going back in, there's concrete right there. We don't have a lot of concrete, we have a lot of corrugated metal pipe, which
Yeah.
tends to rust, like we're seeing, but buying it, I think there's just a lot of different materials that we need to investigate to go away from corrugated metal pipe and look at something else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nosler back. And I want to say it's nice to have you back live.
Live and in person.
Live and in person.
Masked up. Thanks so much, Maria. This is like super fascinating to me because it's really like just a map of how Wheat Ridge came to be in the first place, like because of our agricultural roots. And I honestly know that my great-grandfather, Bacher, he was on the Wheat Ridge Water Board, like way before the city was founded, and that was the only form of government that we had in Wheat Ridge, you know. And he was part of forming the Valley one because those are different. There was another whole set of farms down there that cared about that, and so it's just really interesting to look at. And my question for you is just, are there other municipalities that have this? Like when I talk to Lakewood about this, they're like, what? And Edgewater's so small that, you know, that there's that Denver Water, is the Denver Water building in Edgewater over there, I think?
Yeah,
even?
there is, isn't there?
Yeah.
Right in the corner of, yeah. Like,
And so I just wanted to know, like, I think this is really unique for Wheat Ridge, and I think there's a real opportunity to kind of help along our residents with just messaging on this, that, yeah, we get it, it's a little confusing, but it's also about who we are and how we do this. So anyway, do we know if there's any other municipalities that?
Yeah, so I've worked like, in 3 other communities in the metro area, and none are this complicated.
I mean, I think it's normal for there to potentially be that the city doesn't have the water utility, right? Like you might
Yeah.
have to pay that separate, but I don't think it's 5 districts.
No.
And it's pretty wild.
Yeah, so for example, Commerce City, we didn't have water and sewer. It was provided by South Adams Water and Sanitation District, but it was a water and sanitation district, and it covered the entire city of Commerce City, plus kind of other areas. So it was like, oh, yeah, if you need water or sewer, just call, South Adams Water and Sewer. So it was one phone call, as opposed to, oh, your water is different from your sanitary.
Well, and I think something that's important for residents to know is that each one of these districts have a board that serve. And so if you do have issues or have questions, that you can talk to, like, my uncle is on one of the boards and stuff. And it's a great way also for people to serve the community too, is to be a part of those boards. So the other thing I wanted to just talk about is when I first was elected, we had Denver Water come in and give an incredible presentation on the lead project and why that was happening. And my house, we have lead. We receive Brita water filters monthly from Denver Water. And that's just what's happening. But I think that with a new council coming on board, it'd probably be really helpful to have even Denver Water come and talk about that whole
Definitely.
plan. Because it will start to, like, they're gonna finish Denver soon, and they're gonna start making their way this direction, with all of that. And then, I just have a question about, like, really in District 4, but I think probably District 3 deals a lot with this too. Like, we are on the ridge that makes Wheat Ridge, and District 2 for sure too. But there's a lot of people who are down water, and when the MDP is being redone in 2024, I think that there's a real opportunity to kind of engage with people, because it's not just about the sidewalks, like, because I think people see sidewalks all the time, but like, there's a reason why, like, 44th and Everett, I'm just using my exact address as an example, but like, at the end of the road there, it's all downstream. And if we get any kind of snow melt or any of those things, just a way for, it's a great opportunity to use some of our community engagement resources to educate people about the importance of curb and gutter, talk about elevation and like that people being downstream from that. And one of the biggest like problems with what we have with that kind of runoff, because it's basically runoff, is that because it skips we don't have that curb and gutter there for it, like it ends up going directly into Clear Creek or into these ditches, and it's so bad for the environment. So anyway, there's all my stuff, but this is fascinating to me because it's literally like peeling away the history of Wheat Ridge, So anyway, thanks for this so much.
And yet, to your point about education, I think that's definitely a good thing. So I think how maybe we can look at the website for like a one-stop shop, like how can we put the maps there to say, here's how you identify your sanitation district, here's how you identify your water district, and here's the contacts. But to your point, I've heard this in the past, but, well, I'm up on a hill, so I don't have to worry about stormwater, but you still contribute to it. Just because you're not at the bottom of the hill doesn't mean that your land isn't,
Yeah, we're getting all
adding
your
to that runoff.
fertilizer and all your stuff that you, we got it down at the bottom of the hill, I promise you.
So it's kind of everybody's problem to solve together.
Absolutely, thank you so much, Maria.
Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you. There's short microphones on this side. I have to lean in. Yeah, I remember the first time when Britta Fisher sat down and had to talk with me about special districts in Wheat Ridge, and I was like, this is bananas. I have a couple of things I want to kind of end on the more complex one. First of all, when I'm in other communities, a lot of times they've got those little fish placards next to the storm drains, reminding people that the things that they put into their gutter ultimately go into, like, directly into our waterways. Do we have those in the city, or do we have any, like, programmatic funding to install those?
I thought we did, and I don't know how widespread that is, but we can get back to you on
I
that.
think Bill LaRoe has
Yeah.
done some.
Okay.
We do have Bill LaRoe's our stormwater manager on staff, and he does a lot of education.
Okay.
But we can look to see if there's more.
Yeah, I think, I think the more we can remind people that the things that go in the gutter go into our waterways, we, as a community, I think, really value our waterways. My second topic is, thank you for sharing your personal story of having a ditch in your backyard. You know, when I started doing bike advocacy in the community, you know, everyone gets all excited about creating a trail along our ditches. And do you have any, like overview or insight to, you know, how the city works with, like, ditch access? And I'm thinking about recently when we approved the 32nd and Kipling property, and there was a lot of talk about, like, preserving the trees, and the ditch company said, we want to get rid of the trees because they're, like, taking all our water. And so what is the relationship between the city and the land adjacent to the ditches? Do you have any sense of that, or?
I'm not sure. I know we try and reach out to them and, like, give them the opportunity to comment. You know, like if we have a new development coming in, so similar to, like, we'd send it to Excel or somebody. Whether or not, we pursue, like, putting trails along there, I don't know. I think that would probably come more from the developer itself, probably, rather than the ditch company. So I think, or we'd have to look at it like, and maybe it's a good point for, like, the comp plan or our update to the bike and ped plan, is do those serve the potential for another trail opportunity along ditches?
Yeah, because, I mean, it cuts across Lutheran, and actually that ditch access from Lutheran to Wadsworth, I think, is really valuable, and
Yeah.
into that neighborhood that is adjacent to Allison Street. So the ditches actually go a lot of places that people on foot and on bikes have hard times accessing. So I will definitely keep that in mind as we move forward with updating comp plan, but I think getting some familiarity on how to deal with the ditch companies on that, because they can be, and then the ditch actually, like, from Kipling east, there's some interesting access there, so
Yeah.
I think that's something we'll probably want to chat more about it, I think, at some
And I'm
point.
sorry, I was talking to our IT guy. Were you talking about Rocky Mountain Ditch? coming through? Yeah.
Just in general, the
Yeah,
ditches, and I know they're
clamping
really,
down
they're like
on-
really weird about
Yeah.
it. So they'll throw their junk in your
Yeah.
backyard, but you're not allowed to, like,
Yeah, they're
ride your bike
fencing
on
it
it.
in,
Yeah,
and- yep.
that's awesome. Okay, this is now a curiosity question. What is the treatment plant that's at 41st near the Clear Creek Trail that I think Lakewood owns? That, back behind, like, west of Kipling?
By the rec center.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's where we have that lake on Mother's Day.
Oh.
That's,
No. The stank.
Maria was out there and her waiters.
that was an,
Is it,
that's an
Is
abandoned,
it-
I think that's an abandoned sanitary?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
the northwest, I'm sorry, I can't read that far. Northwest Lakewood Sanitation District?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's no longer, or it's abandoned now.
Okay.
But they still own the site, and so they had to respond when we had that overflow.
okay, I'm asking, again, you think you're talking about, you know, stormwater, I'm talking about bike ped stuff. We had at some point looked at acquiring the rights to that access to redirect the Clear Creek Trail there. And is that something we could revisit if they've abandoned that?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly why we didn't acquire it, if they didn't.
Lakewood didn't, my
Didn't
memory
want
was
to?
Lakewood didn't want
Yeah,
it because they
yeah.
were still operating it. They wanted to maintain that
Yeah.
access. But if they're no longer operating it,
Yeah, we could check into that again.
I think it would be good to revisit that because that was the reason we've rerouted.
Yeah.
And I think that rerouting in front of those parking lots at the Indian restaurant and my favorite reptile store, that is, I think, really dangerous for people riding their bikes. And if we could do that access back up 41st, that would be a much better access point. So, sorry to turn the stormwater into bike ped. I'm going to go back to stormwater though. So to Councilmember Nosler-Beck's bringing up like each one of these districts has its own unique governance. Those I mean, they're not secret ballots, but these elections are things our community are generally not aware of. Would we be able, as a municipality, to require any special district that has an election, like has an elected governing body that serves our community, that they have posting requirements? Because I just don't know, like, how anybody knows that they actually have elected representatives that are making, like, pretty substantial decisions
Yeah.
about.
A few of you are on boards, right? I don't know if we have the ability to require anything. They're mandated by state statute also, the special
Okay.
districts, but we can check into it. And I think they're required to post just as we are. But, you know, it may just be a piece of paper on their front door and wherever their office is.
Okay.
That might, but we can look into that
Yeah.
further.
Because we're all hanging out
Yeah.
up there.
I know, I'm in Applewood Sanitation District, and I got a notice about, like, you can sign up for the board, or to be on the board. There was a vacancy, and I got a mailed notice about that.
That's good.
So some of them must do it, yeah.
Part of why I ask is that when I was in Denver, because of their, they are full service, utility bills were a great way of communicating with the community,
Yeah.
and that's something many times over the last decade I've been really aware that we lack that kind of ability to partner with the utility to communicate with our community. So maybe the broader question is, is there something that we can do to have sort of better relationships with sort of the utilities as partners in the community, but also as communication partners?
To like do an insert or something in
Yeah,
there.
so that we've just got more awareness of what they're doing and if there's opportunities to strategically communicate.
I think it may be just as simple as to ask if you could stuff an envelope with
Yeah.
an insert or something like that.
Yeah, so because I learned a lot about living in Denver through opening utility bills.
I see
so-
Counselor Nasser Beck, it looks like, had an.
I was
wanted
just going to say
interject.
that I think that's probably the better approach is because special districts kind of going to them and saying, we want you to do this requirement one way, they have their own requirements for each one of those boards. I know just from people who serve on those boards that they're constantly looking for people to serve on those. And so maybe going at it from the approach of exactly what you were saying is, how can we help you to get people to serve on these and use this as a way to communicate with the city is a great way to go about it.
Great, thank you for my meandering all over the place exploration. This is a great topic, thanks for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tempore Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's funny, I actually had similar to what Councilor Nasser-Beck and Councilor Holteen said, but my grandfather was also one of the original-ish members of the Wheat Ridge Water Board. But, one of the reasons we have all this here in Wheat Ridge is because he and others back then decided to keep all the utilities separate from the city. Must be a conservative thing or something, I don't know. But kept the city small, right, and made sure that they could be nimble enough to weather a lot of storms without having a lot of other encumbrances. So made sense at the time, at least. Now, as to why we have so many, I have no idea. But my question was a little bit similar to Councilor Holteen's as far as like the ditch and the right-of-way access and stuff like that, because the question I get the most from people in like the Lewis Meadows area is connectivity to like Prospect Valley now, and there's a ditch that runs right behind Councilor Weaver's house there, but runs from Lewis Meadows all the way down. Lena Gulch goes all the way through there, and they want some connectivity to be able to not have to go up to 32nd to do that. So if there's some way or access or people that we need to talk to for that, that would be good to know. And then the other thing I was going to ask was, what kind of a relationship do you have with some of those special districts, like the Wheat Ridge Water District? I know when I was on the board of the Wheat Ridge Water District, we kind of had an acquaintance with the city, but we didn't,
Yeah.
when it came to things like Wadsworth, obviously, we were looking at those projects and waiting and trying to save money to make sure that we knew when Wadsworth happened, we can get in and replace those mains and do things like that. But what is the relationship between the city and those engineers and those managers and
Yeah.
things like that?
Yeah, I think because of Wadsworth, we've interacted with Wheat Ridge Sanitation District and Water District probably more in this last couple of years than probably for the most part that I know of that staff has for a long time. We have a new district manager at Wheat Ridge Water District, AJ. And so I've offered to come to him, offered to come there and meet with their board to at least put a name to a face and start to, you know, break down maybe some of those barriers and maybe identify opportunities where we can work together, whether it's on communication or just, you know, because we can offer maybe, you know, if there's empty board seats, how can we maybe communicate that on the Wheat Ridge website? Where people may go first before they'd go to a district website.
I thought that was interesting, because when I was on there, Mountain View actually put one of their council members on the board specifically, and the rest of us were just kind of general citizens. I know both Zach Urban and Christy Davis, I think, serve on the board now with my mom, but I think that would be interesting to maybe look at maybe even somebody here or somebody like that serving. I know it has to be somebody that's in a resident usually of those districts or whatever, but might be interesting to look at.
Yeah, but, so anyways, yes, I'd like to get out to each of the districts and at least, you know, have me attend one of their meetings, at least within this next year. I think most of them meet monthly, it looks like, based on their website, so I'm sure I could get on an agenda. And then, I'm sorry, your first question was about?
Connectivity, like
Oh,
along
yes.
Lena Gulchen,
So-
but I think it's similar to what you said to
Yeah,
Councilman
I think
Taylor.
they'd be open to that. Obviously, they're not going to contribute to the cost, but we'd have to provide engineering calculations, because of course, they don't want to modify, you know, the flow
Right.
at all. But if we'd submit that to them, then they're, you know, they'll provide us with comments and probably give us an easement to do that,
Okay,
I would guess.
that's great. Thank you.
Counselor Weaver.
A couple comments. Thank you so much for this presentation. I actually, in both my sanitation and my water, do get notification of elections and things. So that is available to people. But I think it would be really helpful, because I get sometimes questions from constituents, because we have a couple water districts, I think in District 3, it's not all consolidated. And just sort of how pricing is created across Wheat Ridge, and I don't know if there's any way we can do that. But, you know, people often don't understand, like you said, what sanitation is versus the garbage that they might be hiring and all these different things. And just because whereas water is supposed to be sort of equivalently priced across the region, there's actually differences
Yeah.
according to water districts and things like that. And so that was my comment on that. I also, regarding the ditches, I am not against any of these connectivity ideas. We're wading into something that's a little bit different beast than just a park being next to it, because the access to ditches is private property up to that access of the ditch. And you're allowed, sorry, I am a ditch executive on my ditch that is not listed on here, but there are lots of little ditches around Wheat Ridge. And there's lots of misunderstanding on who can access the water in the ditch, and is this nice creek going through my backyard, and I think I'll put some rocks and things in it, and you're actually not allowed to do that, and a ditch rider can come. I actually have a different name for the ditch rider, since I am sometimes the ditch rider on my ditch, but it rhymes with ditch. And so I get that job sometimes, and I think these are really, really encouraging conversations to have going forward. We're just sort of touching on some very old rules and things like that. And I think, just personally, I think many of the ditches would really be open to having a dialogue with the city around lots of things, because just that education is so important. And so I think if we can have that conversation of connectivity along with, you know, making sure people know that their ditch isn't going to be stop running or whatever they might be concerned about around that ditch, because it would really be great to have more education about these ditches and have connectivity. I think that would be a really great way to move forward, but it's, you know, what is it? whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting, in the state of Colorado. And the last thing I'd like to say about that is, and I'd be happy to help get involved, anything that, to move forward sort of some of that education and conversation. The water board does have all of the ditches, even minor ditches,
Oh, okay.
in a GIS layer, and I'd be happy
perfect.
to
Okay.
access that and get that. And all the owners, and now, their responsiveness is a whole nother thing, but we do have all of the ditch systems mapped down to the minor ones.
That's
Good.
awesome, yeah.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One of the large drainage ways in our city is Clear Creek, and we have Lena Gulch. What are our obligations as a city with respect to those waterways?
Excuse me. Obligations,
Well, I mean, do we have an obligation to do channeling or keep the waterway within a channel or do maintenance on it, you know? And I
Yes.
want to, in full disclosure, I'm on the board of
Yep.
the urban drainage and flood control, the Mile High Flood District. Actually, I chair that. And further full disclosure, I'm on the board of the Wheat Ridge Sanitation District. So we do have some liaison to those groups. But I was curious whether, you know, in the waterways, do we have an obligation there?
yes, so within the boundaries of the city, it is our responsibility to manage both the floodplain that is adjacent to those waterways, and then also the actual creek itself, or the waterway,
Right.
as well as the floodplain and the floodway. So I know we've done some projects in the past with the Mile High Flood District, and we've submitted a list as well this year to move, potentially do some projects to move properties out of the floodplain.
Right.
So that would, there we'd be working in conjunction with them on that project. The Mile High Flood District is also taking on an update to the master drainage plan for Clear Creek itself. So from, I believe they're going from further than just the boundaries of Wheat Ridge, but we would participate in that,
Okay.
both financially and then as a partner to work towards those final solutions, which will be a series of recommendations for either capital projects or maintenance projects ongoing.
Okay.
Yep.
Good, yeah, let me know if I can assist in that, because that's, you know, they're a good partner, and they,
Yeah.
you know, participate in the funding of it and the whole 9 yards, particularly in the design. The other thing that I wanted to sort of talk about or mention is that we don't have a separate funding mechanism for storm drainage in the city, do we?
We do not, no.
And are there some ideas floating around out there how we might, because I think drainage is really going to be more and more of an issue as we go on, you know, in terms of being, you know, life safety and quality of life issues. What are some of the ideas that we might think about to fund drainage issues?
Sure. So the typical mechanism that's used in the Denver metro area and really along the Front Range is a stormwater utility fee. So it's a separate fee outside of taxes that is generated by each property. As I mentioned earlier, each property contributes stormwater because there's a certain amount of runoff that comes from each property. And basically, there's a calculation based on the size of your property. So a typical single-family home has the same rate, but then commercial properties, large industrial, are based on the amount of impervious surface, so the amount that's paved versus unpaved, and there's a rate so much per that. But I don't know if it's every city. I don't want to go on the record of that, but I would say we're probably one of the only, very few, communities within the Front Range that don't have a stormwater utility in place. So I think that would be the primary mechanism that we'd be looking at, again, from a fairness perspective, that it's spread across all properties in a uniform way, and that other communities, you know, are charging that fee to fund their stormwater and don't need to use general fund or other sources to take care of their stormwater system.
Okay. Thank you. And then I just wanted to circle back on Councilor Ohm's question about if we were to bring storm sewer up to a location that, you know, I guess had a detention pond or retention pond, usually those are, in my experience, I've built a few, it has a concrete outfall structure, that it would seem like that would sort of be the natural tie-in there, is to sort of break a hole in the back of that vault and
Yeah,
pipe
if
it
we can
in.
make the grades work, yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, great. Counselor Hutchinson?
Thank you. I have a question about the sanitation districts. So these districts are to maintain the lines in the road, right?
Correct.
Like for water and things like that. Okay, so how do we know, as residents, how the sanitation lines are in the road when you don't ever see anybody out there looking at them? They don't take off the manholes, and so the resident is responsible for the sanitation, the line from the road to the house, say? Okay, but what happens if the main sewer line in the road is not being maintained, and there's roots and things in there that could affect, okay, a person's residential line? All right, so, why aren't they out there checking that? And it's the very same with the water, you know, so Denver Water, the mains that are in the road, those are lead lines? Is that what is being said?
Not necessarily the mains, so it's more the service line from the main to the house is more, that those were installed with either lead joints or material that has a high concentration of lead.
Well, it's the very same thing with the water, because I sure don't see any looking at what's going on. It seems like we're in a mode of being reactive instead of proactive. And I do believe that there could be things going on in the middle of the road that do affect people's personal drainage lines and things like that. When XL can come out and make a statement that, oh, you're the third house I've been to today because of sewer lines, you know, in your area. That, to me, is a flag. What's going on? And where's their responsibility to be checking? It's been a few years before I've seen them out in the road looking at anything. And
But-
even I know when they were out there and they take up a manhole, I go, do you see where my sewer line is going out there? No, I don't see where it is. Oh, where is it? Going to my neighbor's house or what? I mean, you don't get anything from them.
Let me tell you that at our board meeting, we review about 75 cameras that go down the sewer, where they've been, where they've looked at. There's a whole list of people, calls that have been made to the sewer district that they've responded to and what the outcome was when they responded to it. There's a whole mapping system that tells them what percentage of the line and the lines downstream, how they relate to the capacity that they're going to currently carry. And when new developments come, they have calculations that calculate the amount of load that's going to be added to any particular lateral or line in the system. And, you know, if it exceeds 80 or 90% of capacity, then the developer needs to pay to upgrade the downstream portion so that they have enough sewer capacity to carry that. So there's really quite a robust engineering analysis that's sort of continually done on the systems. You probably don't see them out in the field, you know, doing their work, but most of this happens, you know, at a manhole somewhere, and they're running 300 feet of line, you know, camera line down there or something like that. So there's maybe sort of more to it's all underground, so it doesn't appear that there's something there, but I think there's quite a bit going on.
Okay, and then there's also the issue of people who have wells, and there's also water rights. So, you know, also, I mean, a lot of the houses are old and things like that, and there are places that do have water rights, And this is even before Denver Water, you know? And so, does that play into anything?
Yeah, my understanding is that wells are regulated by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And so I believe even private water wells serving just one property need to be registered with them. And then if the property is redeveloped to such an extent, they typically will want you to go on the adjacent or the water district instead of having that well, because it's unregulated in terms of what type of chemicals or hazardous materials. Typically, you're not testing that at home as frequently as the water that you would get through a water main. So I think they're encouraging people to give those up and get onto a municipal water system of some sort.
And I think most people, like I know in District 1, use it for irrigation,
Yeah.
right?
As
They're
opposed
not
to drinking,
drinking it.
yeah. Yeah.
Like in the mountains.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Great presentation,
Thank you.
Maria. Very interesting. Any other discussion on this item? Okay. Before we go to agenda item number 2, I'd like to recognize Councilor Nasser Beck.
Thanks so much, Mayor, and I'm gonna have to leave now. I'm just not feeling well enough. I just get really tired, so, but it was great to be with everybody tonight. And I just, I just wanted to be recognized during elected officials, matters at the end. Hold on, let me just stop for a second. I just wanted to recognize that at St. Peter and Paul School over the weekend, the Carmelite sisters were recognized for coming to Wheat Ridge for 20. They've been here for 20 years, and their service to this community has been amazing. They've transformed the school over there, and they've been incredibly helpful to my family. My entire family on my mom's side went to that school when it was first opened in 1959, I think, and they've all gone to that school. But then with my cancer diagnosis, my family has also sent our kids there, and we've been welcomed by that entire community and also the sisters there. So I just wanted to recognize them before I headed out. And then also just wanted to say that this is probably my last in-person meeting with everyone. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. But I love you all very much. I love this community very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming tonight, and more importantly, thank you for all the service that you've given to Wheat Ridge. You've been a terrific counselor. You've given it all, and we really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to change some slides. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, we will move to agenda item number 2. This is a discussion of our sidewalk maintenance program. Mr. Goff.
Yeah, another important topic, especially if, we have the ballot question on this November, which the funding will help with sidewalk repair and gap filling and maintenance. And we really don't have a great program together on criteria for standards for sidewalk repair and maintenance. So Maria has put together some proposed program for that. So turn it over to
All right, Maria.
Thank you. So, yes, as Mr. Goff mentioned, I think just going with this past year, identified this as an area of need in that we get an awful lot of phone calls to just say, hey, my sidewalk is cracked, my sidewalk is heaved. And unlike other communities where the onus is actually on the, per code, it's typically on the property owner to maintain that. And here, there is no language in the code to that effect. And so then absent that language, then the responsibility becomes the city's. And when we receive those calls, I think in the past, it's been somewhat hit or miss on whether they get added to the program, how we deal with a trip hazard if we've just completed the year's sidewalk maintenance contract, then is that trip hazard going to be there for the next 8 to 9 months? That's not really good either. There's been a relatively recent, in 2021, there was a court case that went to the Colorado Supreme Court, actually. A resident or a pedestrian sued actually the city of Boulder over a trip hazard. And the whole idea of governmental immunity, how quickly you're supposed to respond to types of incidences, and what kind of program we have in place really helped drive how the city was determined to be either compliant or non-compliant in that case. And the city actually prevailed in that court case, but there was also a lesson to be learned for other communities in putting a more robust program together and being more responsive when we do get calls, so that we have some criteria to go by as to whether or not we should fix this immediately, put it on the list, and recognizing, though, that there's limited funds as well. And so balancing all of that, and so that's what this sidewalk maintenance program is really focused on, is being proactive, so systematic inspection, trying to go out and at least inspect part of the city each year using city staff, repairing those identified hazards, so basically telling when we hear that from other people around the community, or those ones that we've inspected and we've identified, how do we start to repair those based on some priorities, and then responding to those hazards in a very prompt manner. Not just letting them sit on the shelf or, hey, we'll get to it next year and then forgetting about it, but actually making a point to go out and make sure that they're relatively safe in the interim. So really our overall purpose is to ensure that safe network for all users, and as well to preserve our governmental immunity, and again, be doing that in a very proactive way. This program will also cover other concrete assets, so we're responsible for curb and gutter as well. Not the driveway aprons themselves. The apron is what connects basically the street to your driveway. That is still the responsibility of the property owner. But the ends of alleys, for example, that's another, or concrete cross pans for drainage, those would all fall under the realm of this program. We don't know how much of that is still missing, if you will. And that doesn't necessarily mean that every street is going to have sidewalk on both sides, but where are those gaps? And as we move forward, and if the ballot initiative is successful, we're going to have to identify somehow where those gaps are. So there might be 2 segments of sidewalk. Is that last half block needed to make that connection? Or, you know, we can see the path being worn in the grass or on the side of the road. Is that a good location to put sidewalk in? Similarly, we don't know right now how many pedestrian ramps are out there, and of those, which ones are either deficient or we're just missing it all. So we still have raised curb and gutter at a corner as opposed to some sort of pedestrian ramp. This chart, which is, I can go over in more detail, but basically starts to give some criteria around how we would go out and rate a particular sidewalk if it was reported to us. Or again, if we were being proactive about going down a street and saying, where does this rate? So instead of that being up to the rater, this gives some very quantitative as well as some qualitative data as well, or elements to allow them to actually measure things and determine which category it fits into. So ranging from 1 or good up to 4 or unsatisfactory. And our goal overall would be is to address those unsatisfactory ones in the next year's program. Here's just a couple of examples from around the city. This one, we're actually gonna fix this. This is on 32nd Avenue, just east of Ward. So this is a raised, this is a sort of a ped ramp, but these colored materials are no longer ADA acceptable. But also, what's more important here, and it's probably difficult to see in this picture with this shade, but there's a large, it's a tripping hazard because it is so far raised. The curb and gutter has been broken. Something's going on underneath it that's causing it to raise. And there's this sign here. I don't know how effective that is, or if that was part of the Valvoline project, probably. But really, imagine walking along there in the dark and coming to that. So this is another one on 38th, just west of Dover. So you can see this was probably replaced, maybe something to do with this fire hydrant, but huge trip hazard here that's not identified. But you can see that this looks like older concrete, which is in good shape, and then this one segment of both curb and sidewalk is in really poor condition. Here's one that we've marked out for removal and replacement. And again, that must be probably a good 2.5 inches here at the edge. And then we have, this is down on 29th Avenue where we've got some really damaged curb that also needs to be replaced. So our prioritization would be is that, again, we'd rate one area per year to evaluate those hazards. And then we'd combine those with any ones that we've heard over the last year that come up to that rating of 4. That would be the basis of our list for the next year's projects. Then we'd also look at some other criteria, basically trying to leverage that with other projects that are going on, or if it's either along an arterial collector street or within, as it says there, 1/4 mile of a particular facility like a park or a library, something like that. Things adjacent to a transit stop, and then of course, all this with under the umbrella of how much money is available and how easy it is or hard to construct. If possible, we'd also like to throw in some of those that are rated 3 or marginal if possible, just because we're already there. Those criteria are pretty, close to each other, and a lot of times we're like, well, as long as we're here, let's just try and do this at the same time and really come out with a good product at the end. So our repair types, again, that temporary patching, probably with asphalt, our street staff would do that, is to just fill in that gap in the short term. So imagine in this project, instead of keeping it in this condition until it can be removed and replaced, we'd put in asphalt here to at least give sort of a ramp up if you're walking, and that you don't hit that with the edge of your toe or your foot and then fall forward. But some more permanent repairs, we have tried grinding this past year down kind of in the southeast portion of town, and that's worked fairly well.
Yeah.
Especially on areas that are fairly minimal, and of course you're not going to the expense of removing and replacing, so it's much more cost effective and it's worked pretty well. Crack filling we can do as well with more of an epoxy material, and then ultimately the remove and replace, which is the most expensive part of that. Pedestrian ramps, some things that, it's unfortunately not a one and done, so we do have quite a few pedestrian ramps around town, but those ADA guidelines change over time. And so they're becoming much more strict in terms of what those slopes can be and looking at that more closely. And so even where we might have some ramps, they don't necessarily meet current guidelines. So we're having to go back and retrofit those, which typically involves removal and replacement to meet the grades. There have been both Colorado Springs, Denver, I know at least those two have been sued over the lack of adherence to the guidelines, even where they're going in and they're replacing them. The ped ramps, they're not paying close enough attention to meet those guidelines, and therefore they have lawsuits in the back. And Denver's been pretty aggressive in going back and correcting those after the fact because of that lawsuit. So our goal would be is once we go through and identify just how many we have, which ones are compliant or not, is we'd like to establish a goal of, at this point, X, we're not certain yet, but try to shoot for a certain number of ramp replacements or upgrades every year going forward. And that's it. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is that it? Well, that was quick, sorry. Okay, we'll go to questions. Start on this side with Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you. These are like some of my favorite topics tonight. So it is interesting that we have that responsibility here in the city. When, you know, my colleagues at Denver Streets Partnership have just gone through a whole thing with Denver shifting that and finding mechanisms for funding it. So a couple of things. One is, I'm just going to share it here. I know it's not the right discussion, but, you know, just, I think one of the things with 2J we're really hopeful for is that when it passes, that it's actually funding some of the significant gaps in our main corridors, and that, you know, and just like, I think all the time of like west side of Kipling, between like 38th and 44th, and how hard it is to navigate that. But recognizing our hodgepodgey network of existing sidewalks in our communities, are you talking about like, if you can go back, you had a pretty wordy slide there. So are you suggesting here that like you look at all of these like ratings 1 through 4, and like the hope would be to just do all of the 4s, but if there's not enough funding, then there would be a prioritization around, does it serve a school, is it on an arterial, like is there a ranking within that you would then be prioritizing?
Yeah, so I think the intent here is not necessarily about the bond initiative as much as just our yearly program. So
Okay.
right now, I didn't put a slide in here, but we expend roughly $200,000 to $300,000 on sidewalk repairs, or concrete repairs, I should say. And so assuming that same amount going forward, we have to focus or do some prioritization within that. So the intent would be is to use these prioritization criteria to help us define that. If the 2J comes about, then I think we'd be talking about the sidewalk gaps through that program, not necessarily through the annual maintenance. And then we would do a more in-depth review of where are those gaps and how do we start to prioritize those
Okay,
around
great.
schools, whatever.
Awesome. Well, this all looks good to me. I mean, this seems like a pretty clear-cut, like programmatic way of approaching it, and it seems like a good use of the funds we have available. One thing I just want to make note of is I've noticed in several places as somebody who rides their bike oftentimes on the sidewalk because there's not a bike lane. A lot of the ADA pans that have been installed even in the last couple of years are degrading, and they're like kind of loose. So would replacement of those pans be part of this program? Because
Yes.
they end up kind of chipping away, and then they
Yes.
kind of become a hazard, so.
We've tried, I guess, quite a few different of those truncated domes, and some of them have worked out better than others.
Okay.
Or like a snowplow will hit the corner of them sometimes if they're the plastic ones, and then chip it off or break it. So yeah, I think we continue to try and find that best product for those locations.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. I was looking at some of the criteria, and just to clarify, like, what if it's just missing a concrete chunk, like a substantial, would that be that would fall in that criteria?
Yes,
Okay.
so, I think even where it's not raised, but where there's a depression, would definitely fit in there, because again, it's a difference in elevation that would cause your foot to go down or step in a different way, would be something necessary to fix.
And then, has the city thought about like having I guess I'd call it a clearinghouse where we could report, like, what if citizens are just like, hey, I've tripped on this, and it may not be in your subject area for the year, where they could just say, hey, I got an issue, and it would just go to a specific, I guess mailbox, for that lack of a better term.
Yes, yeah, so as an outcome of this, we'd be putting some better information on our website, not only under Public Works, where you might tend to look, but also under our area for like reporting a hazard, and having a specific drop-down for sidewalk maintenance.
Okay.
And so that we can get to it quickly, and then it gets routed basically to the right person.
I've noticed that in the past, and it might be areas where, say there's a tree, and so the city's come out and they've taken that piece out, and it's usually the smaller pieces, say roughly around 5 foot wide. They'll take that out, they'll put the new one in, and those definitely have a tendency to reheave again, maybe because of the tree root. But I've noticed when they're doing a, just ballpark 10 to 15 foot long, maybe it's the heaviness of that one, it has less of a tendency. And that's my only thought, is that it's just a heavier piece, and maybe that's staying in place. But on the tree root side, I did see that it says something about mitigating tree roots under sidewalks, and I had a tree that I've since cut down that started doing that, heaving that part of that sidewalk up. And when I was digging out the roots, I could see where, yes, it was coming out of the sidewalk. But if you're having that issue, do you then would you try to cut that root down deeper so that it wouldn't be a future problem?
Yes, I think what I've experienced in the past is that we'll have, like, when they're actually doing the removal and replacement, it'll be the concrete crews doing that, which
Okay.
might not be the right people to go after the roots. So in talking to Parks staff here, they would prefer if we have an arborist out there from staff to assist in determining how much of that can be cut, should be cut, and give us some guidelines, and actually kind of be looking and be there with us when those roots are being cut, to try and help that situation.
Because I have a neighbor in my neighborhood, they have a cottonwood, and that cottonwood has tree roots.
Yeah.
Underneath the asphalt, you can see the heaving of the sidewalk, the asphalt, so that's a much more complicated issue. But the last question I have is, so if the city gets some type of correspondence email and says, hey, there's whatever substantial, like, heaving of the sidewalk, it's a tripping hazard from and you may or may not know this answer, but does the city have a certain time frame? Like you've already done the area, you've already spent the budget, but now it's like, hey, we have a pretty significant tripping hazard. Does the city have a legal obligation then to say, either prioritize it or go out there and at least pave it or something to mitigate it in a certain time frame?
That's what this does.
Okay.
So I think I put in there 5 business days.
Okay.
Or, if we get busy, as soon as possible. I think our goal would be, we never had a goal before. We probably did that sporadically. So the intent would be is that we receive either an email or a phone call, somebody would go out, an inspector would go out and evaluate it and say, yeah, it needs something temporary. Then our street staff would have 5 days from there to go out and actually install it, would be the goal. And that's part of that governmental immunity thing, is to have an established process and established timeframes for doing that.
I really appreciate you taking this effort and doing this. In the past, I've had people call, and sometimes we get done, sometimes
Yeah.
not, and this is really kind of righting that ship. Thank you so much.
Counselor Hutchinson.
Thank you. Just adding to what you've just talked about, by Panorama Park, 35th and Depew, I believe, I was driving by. It's been a year or so. Saw an older man do a face plant right off of, going on to Depew Street or whatever, and got him all fixed up, called his wife and things like that. But then I did contact Public Works, and they came out and looked at it, and before even a week, it was fixed. So, I think, especially if you see something happening, that they're going to act on it, and they did, and I was very appreciative of that.
Okay. Counselor Hulteen.
If this is too much of a non sequitur, just tell me, but I have more than once turned my ankle, actually, where like the asphalt all of a sudden drops off, where there is no sidewalk or curb or gutter. Is that something you look at? I mean, I know that's like a total can of worms, but I will say, that is something I really turned my ankle pretty badly once, but just walking my neighborhood where there isn't sidewalks, and I'm like, because I live in, where I live, there's sidewalks for 2 houses and then not, and so you're kind of going up and down and off. So those asphalt edges are really jagged and inconsistent. Is that something that you would, I know that's a little bit trickier, but those are hazards as well, and definitely are materials.
Yeah, I think and maybe we address that less in the sidewalk maintenance and more in the pavement maintenance, which I'll be bringing back to you probably within hopefully the next couple of months. But those are the areas, those edges, without curb and gutter to kind of hold that all into place. That's where the water then runs and then breaks up all the asphalt, and that's where people tend to walk. So it's the perfect storm. I think as we go forward with pavement maintenance, looking at how we crown those edges and just how we build them, I think, and maybe paying a little bit more attention, because what tends to happen, and I've seen this in here, but you know, it thins out, the asphalt gets thinner as you get to the edges to create that crown, and then it also it doesn't hold up as well. So maybe looking at how we build those, and when we do like a mill and overlay of those streets, making sure that those are how we tie back in. We can do that.
And then I guess I do have another question. So there's a segment on 44th in front of, there's a memory care center at like 44th and Yarrow. And there's a segment of concrete there that is just completely spalled. And it looks like either there was some damage from construction, because like some of the stamped concrete bricks that are there are kind of spalling too. So I guess there's a two-part question. Like, do we have standards for when either commercial properties or individuals are doing flat work, that they use a standard of concrete? Because if we're inheriting their repairs and they're using substandard materials, I mean, that seems like something that matters. And then if there's damage to it that's done, like obviously from, you know, a contractor that, like the private property owner, whether it's commercial property owner, like if they've actually done the damage, is that something that we hold them accountable for? Or does that end up being our problem too?
Yeah, so the question about the specifications, we do require a certain PSI on the concrete. Whether we get that or not, I don't know that we're checking for that when the load of concrete comes out. Like they just poured sidewalk around the Chick-fil-A, for example, within the last week. I'd have to ask and see what we're actually seeing, if we're getting what we're requiring. But yeah, they're especially, and was one I'm gonna watch. So it's mid-October, they're pouring sidewalk, and depending on how that gets hit with salt will help exacerbate that spalling of the surface, or how much it was treated, you know, when they finished the concrete. So we do have a 2-year warranty on development projects, and they're responsible even if it is the salt that's causing it. Anything longer term, like where you mentioned where the property owner has done the damage, I haven't seen this going back after that. I don't know where we'd have to point to something in the code and then do something through code enforcement probably to do that. And I guess it'd be a general hazard, but I don't think we've done that in the past.
Okay, I think just knowing we've got the standards, that definitely helps. And as you know from last week, I'm more than happy to taste test the new multi-use trails to see if they're of high enough quality. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Maria, I had a couple of questions. The city, going back to the sort of the stamped colored concrete, are there provisions in here to review the quality and the longevity of those types of flat work? Because I know that because it's a different color, it happens at a different time than you do on the sort of the sidewalk and curb and gutter repair.
Yes, those are definitely challenging. In the past, I think it's getting better, but because of that additive with the color, it's caused that to be weaker strength concrete. I think it's getting better though, but the challenge has been is that once you press a stamp into it, it's finding that stamp again, getting it to match if you're just taking out a section, and then not causing another tripping hazard by what you're basically replacing with. So we're trying to look at that, like for example, along Wadsworth, is not necessarily putting those in locations where they can be walked on, but more on like the side slopes, areas that aren't necessarily subject to where you would walk, but they are concreted, if you will.
Okay.
But yeah, we've got a lot of that around town that we'll still have to deal with.
Okay, So a lot of it sort of happens in the tree lawn
Yep.
area where we're doing hardscape instead of softscape there. The other one, I wanted to sort of circle back on Counselor Ohm's question, and this is, I have a very large tree in my yard. It's about 100 years old, and it's totally taken up the tree lawn area, and every 5 years when the roots are heaving the concrete, they, the arborists don't come out there. The guys that are doing concrete have a axe. I think they were doing it with the axe to get it down to grade so that they could cover that. I was thinking about, we probably have a couple of feet of right-of-way inside the proper, or between the inside of the sidewalk and the property line of a couple of feet. Is it possible to maybe come up with a design that brings the sidewalk around in a curve or in
Yes.
some sort of a segment around there, so we sort of alleviate some of that or provide some additional space for trees?
Yes, that's a great idea. I think, because we don't want to lose the tree, obviously. The problem is just that it gets more expensive, because now you're replacing maybe more than one
Right.
stone.
Yep,
You're
yep.
probably going back 3 or 4
Yeah,
in
it's
each
3 or
direction.
4 stones, and, yeah.
But,
so-
yes, that is an option.
Okay, good. Counselor Ohm?
Yeah, one thing I want to comment on is that red plastic, the 88, is just awful. I wonder, do we have anything in the city spec that calls out for something that's more, typically what I've seen in the past is, it's definitely an iron type steel, very sturdy, resistant to the salts. I've never seen one come off with a plow. I suppose it could, but, definitely that plastic just seems like it buckles or the glue just separates and it's missing pieces. And probably just the general, 5,000 feet of elevation with the sun bearing down, it just deteriorates the plastic. It's just not sturdy, but I don't know what the city spec is right now in those.
I'd have to look. I don't know if we call out a specific material or not.
Yeah.
I know some of the ones that I've seen were just like a very thin, almost piece of plastic, and
Yep.
just, I think, try to stick it to the concrete.
That's what I see in
Some
my
of the new
neighborhood.
ones are more like, almost like a cookie cutter, where it's got edges, and then you stick it down into the concrete when it's soft. Yes, I don't know off the top of my head, but we can look at that and follow up.
Okay. I mean, I've used, I'm not going to say the name brand, but I've used the ones that are made out of iron, and they seem like they're more of a commercial, what you would see anywhere, like in Denver or somewhere else. But yeah, I just don't, I think it's a poor quality. And I would definitely, my opinion is I would definitely rather see the money spent on that than the colored concrete for the ramps going up.
There's a couple of forges. Nina casts one. I know you can buy custom casting. I think, Belmar has custom casting in there, but they're not as economical as the red domes. Additional discussion on this item? Okay. Well, Maria, thank you again. This is a great presentation for all of our concrete works. Okay, we will now go to staff reports. Mr. Goff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe just a quick update, a little bit of good news on our finances. If y'all know, through the budget process, we were talking about how flat sales tax revenues were, and actually maybe a little bit of decrease. I think through August, we were showing sales tax year-to-date was down about 0.4%, so not a huge amount, but still impacts our budget. But September financials came through, and we're actually seeing a little bit of an uptick. Month to month, September to September, this September was 5% higher than last September. But then if you look at year-to-date through September compared to last year, it's brought our sales tax actually up to 0.5% instead of down 0.4%. So almost a full percentage increase. So we don't know if that's going to continue, that trend throughout the rest of the year, but we've had several other revenue sources that were a lot higher in September also. So keep your fingers crossed. We're going to keep a close eye on it, and hopefully we'll continue seeing that upward trend.
I'm seeing that in my Visa bill.
Oh, have you? Oh,
Yeah,
good.
I am.
That's it.
That's it, okay. We will go to elected official reports. Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you. I've got two things. Happiness Gardens report. Oh my God, stuff's happening there. I thought it was like the season's winding down, and instead they're out there with crews, building some really cool crusher fine paths, and like really they put in a new fence around the flower garden part. And so just when you think Happiness Gardens is like winding down, it gets good over there. So they're doing a lot of work and investing, and so go check out Happiness Gardens. The second thing is Councilmember Ohm and I are going to be hosting a District 2 meeting a week from tomorrow night. So that is Tuesday, the 24th of October. And we are hosting it at I don't even know what we're calling the building.
We call it the PNSB for Parks and Neighborhood Services Building.
Yeah, so that's why no one knows what it's called.
7575 West 45th.
Yes, I know the address. So 7575 West 45th. And City Manager Patrick Goff will be there, and we are working with Foothills Regional Housing Authority to be there also. And we are hoping that's a great opportunity for neighbors in that area and anyone in District 2 who wants to learn more about some of the projects that are being built in our district, including the Ives and Van Street lofts. We hope to see people there, and if you have any questions, please let us know. Thanks.
Terrific, thank you. Additional, Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Had the excellent opportunity to walk with you and Councilor Hulteen and Councilor Ohm and, well, just about everybody. We were out on Wadsworth the other day. It was eye-opening. It was really cool to see. I will say the CFI lanes go back a lot further than I thought they would. So that's going to be an adjustment, I think, for a lot of people as that opens in the next few years. But really cool to see, and I appreciate Director DeAndrea for putting that together because I think that we all learned a lot that day, including what color pipes go with what. Blue for water, by the way, green for sewage, just in case you were wondering. Also, the mayor hosted the Business Appreciation Awards the other day, and did a fantastic job. I think there were like 70 pages of dialogue, and he had about 58 of them. So very, very impressed with the mayor there. But it was really cool to see our peers, business owners out there that work hard all year long be recognized for what they do. Congratulations to Tad and Stylus and Crate for Business of the Year. And I was honored to get up and recognize our Council Partnership Award, which was the Weird Education Coalition. And Councilor Nasser-Beck and I had a good hand in putting that together, but I really appreciate Council for supporting them and voting for them because they're doing a lot of work in our community. They were at the Weird Homecoming game passing out Future Farmer shirts the other day, and you know, the most important thing is that we get those kids in our elementary schools to go to Everett and to go to Wheat Ridge so we can continue to have a strong neighborhood school path here in Wheat Ridge. And, I believe that's it. Thank you very much. Oh, and then Councilor Weaver and I had our kind of unofficial District 3 meeting at Lewis Meadows Park the other day. We had some interesting questions. I wanted to thank Officer Naira from the Wheat Ridge Police Department for coming and answering some questions. Is it Naira? Naira.
It's Naira.
Naira, I think. That's what I thought, yeah. Did a phenomenal job answering questions for the public and for me as well. But definitely a good perspective, especially on what's going on at I-70 and Kipling. And I will say our officers are very thankful for some of the things that we're passing here because it gives them some ammunition to be able to go out and do some things. So appreciate what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional elected officials reports. I will say thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites, for mentioning the Business Awards. You know, it's a fun event every year, and what really impresses me about those is that we have so many entrepreneurs that come to our city and want to set up shop here and invest their money and their livelihoods here. So it was very well done. I appreciate all the staff help that went into that. Really happy to attend the Huckleberry Roasters ribbon cutting on Friday. Great new roasting coffee outlet at Harlan and 38th Avenue in the southeast corner, taking the underperforming asset and really did great work there. So is there anything else that we should discuss before our study session? Okay, then we will adjourn our study session. We have, I've called a special meeting. Do we need to take a break before the special meeting, or is everybody good to go? Then I would like to open the special city council meeting for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for, let's see, today is the 16th of October, 2023. Just for the record, I'm going to go through the roll call. We have Councilor Hulteen with us,
Present?
and Councilor Hutchinson,
Here.
Councilor Dozman,
Here.
let's see, Councilor Weaver,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stites,
Here.
and Mayor Ohm.
Here.
Okay, not Mayor Ohm, Councilor Ohm, you know, getting a little ahead of myself, you know, no inference there. Councilor Noslerbeck was unable to join us tonight, and Councilor Hoppy is not with us tonight. Let's see, just very quickly, I don't have anyone signed up to speak. If there's anyone here that would like to speak at this meeting, you may come to the podium now in council chambers. If you're joining us online, you may raise your hand and we'll bring you into the meeting. I'm going to give it just a very short time to see if anyone's coming forward. Is there anyone raising their hand?
Nobody.
Okay, and nobody in council chambers, so we'll close our public's right to speak, and we will go to our first agenda item. We have a request to cancel the October 23rd, 2023 regular business meeting due to the lack of agenda items. You don't have any staff report on this, do you?
No.
Okay. So are there any questions of staff before I ask for motion? May I have a motion then to cancel the October 23rd meeting? Mayor Pro Tem Stites?
I move to cancel the October 23rd meeting.
Second?
There's a motion and a second by Councilor Hulteen. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by yes by raising your hands. Affirmative. Thank you. I have the votes tabulated there. In the anyone opposing this motion? Seeing none, the motion passes 6-0. There are no other items. Is there any other business to come before the council in our special meeting? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. We will be back here not next week, not the following week, because it's the 5th Monday. So we will be back here the 2nd of November. What's the date?
The night before the election.
Okay, the night before the election. We're not going to cancel that meeting?
No,
Okay.
we have agenda items.
All right, so everyone be careful. Go out there. We have election coming up. Well, I guess we'll have another meeting before that, so we'll talk about that then. Thank you very much.